Good morning. Well, this is weird, but nevertheless, here we are, or rather, here I am, at home, talking with you through my iPhone, held by Soon. This is weird. I feel somewhat like Thomas in our gospel lesson for today. I want to see you. I want to touch you. But of course I can't. Unlike Thomas, although it's not clear that Thomas touched Jesus either, even though Jesus invited him to do so, after Thomas confesses to his faith, Jesus says, "Do you believe me because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen me, yet have come to believe." I'll come back to that. Come on, follow me. We are in the second Sunday of the season of Easter. Oftentimes, although not always, the gospel lesson for this season of Easter are stories about people, mainly disciples, who encountered Jesus in their lives after Easter. There's no story in the canonical Gospels about anyone having experienced Jesus' resurrection. Instead, there's stories about people who encountered Jesus after Easter. Our gospel lesson for today is the story of Thomas encountering Jesus. The traditional title of this story is The Doubting Thomas. But that's not really a very good title for this, because Thomas doesn't ask for anything more than what any other person had to complete their faith, and that is an encounter with Jesus. So Thomas asked for what everybody else had. No one believed in the resurrection based on the testimony of another. They all were based on their own experience with Jesus after Easter. The kind of experience you're going to have depends on where you are in your life when it happens. It's going to be different for those who knew Jesus before Easter and for those who didn't know Jesus before Easter. Before moving to the kind of experience you might have if you never met Jesus when he was in his worldly ministry, I want to first talk about Peter. Because Peter's story, to me, is really the gospel story. Peter, along with all the other disciples, flee the Garden of Gethsemane when the soldiers from the temple come to arrest him. But Peter follows them when they arrest Jesus to the compound where he is interrogated by the religious authorities. He's standing around a fire just outside the compound with other people when a woman sees him and comes up to him and says, "You're one of them. You're a follower of Jesus." And Jesus denies it 3 times. So when we get a story about Peter encountering Jesus in his life, and this is found also in the Gospel of John, we don't get, which would be a very human thing, Jesus saying to Peter, Peter, what did you do? Jesus doesn't condemn him and doesn't reject him and doesn't even mention what happened, unless you think Jesus' 3 questions, Peter, do you love me, is somehow an allusion to his 3 times denying of Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, I condemn you, I reject you for what you did. No. Jesus calls him. With an encounter comes a call. Let's move on to Paul. Paul never knew Jesus in his worldly ministry. Never met the person. Doesn't know what he looks like. His encounter with Jesus is going to be quite different from anyone who knew Jesus before Easter. Now, the story about Paul's encounter is found in Acts, but also found in Paul's epistles. In Acts, Paul doesn't see Jesus, although he does hear his voice. Paul's own talk about his encounter with Jesus is found only very slimly. In 1 Corinthians, he says, it is no longer I that live, but Christ that lives in me. And in Galatians, he says, it pleased God to reveal his Son in me. That's about all he says about the encounter. But immediately after saying that, he says that I might preach the gospel to Gentiles. With the encounter comes a call. We are in the second Sunday of Easter. I want to touch you. I want to see you. I want to hug you. I want to greet you. I can't wait for the time when we can again be the gathered church seeking Christ in each other. Amen.